I'm Amanda Nigg, and you guys are listening to Head Smack Podcast.
You are listening to conversations with misfits, mavericks, and trailblazers.
Hey, welcome to the Head Smack Podcast. My name is Paul Pavolny, and I'm excited to have another misfit with me. Amanda Nigg is a trailblazing founder of FarmFit Training. She's certified by NASM as a personal trainer, nutrition coach, wellness coach, and running coach. Amanda is dedicated to enhancing the physical and mental well-being of the agricultural community, guided by the philosophy that life is 10% what happens to us and 90% how we respond. Amanda is on a mission to build strength and resilience in the agricultural sector. Amanda, welcome. Glad to have you on.
I'm excited to be here. Thank you.
That's quite a niche and quite a sector that you have leaned into. So I want to hear the story of how you ended up there by sharing a little bit about your origin story. How did Amanda get started, and how did she end up in health and fitness to do with the farming community?
Well, I grew up in western Nebraska, which, let's be honest, Nebraska is very agriculture in the western side of the state. We call it the panhandle, but I guess you can't call it the panhandle because, like, Texas has a panhandle, so does Oklahoma. It's like, where you at? But I grew up in western Nebraska in a small town called Alliance. And it was very so much like you were in the railroad or you were in agriculture. Those were the two biggest industries. So I grew up around agriculture, but I wasn't in agriculture. My dad actually worked for the railroad. My mom worked for UPS. And then I went to college at the University of Wyoming. And so I loved it. It was a great start to my adventures. But what got me to South Dakota was actually a medical degree, believe it or not.
Oh, wow. Wow.
I have a degree in radiation therapy. So I do nothing with it, obviously.
But what drew you to that? You know, you said that there's two options where you're from. What drew you to medicine?
Well, medicine was always my starting point because, like, I love the fact of help. I'm a helper. I'm a fixer. So my personality is I love to fix things or solve issues that are not solved. And oncology is a field where a lot of people don't understand it. And there's so much to it where you can really dive into like different types of cancer, like how they I'm going to say this and somebody's going to correct me if I'm wrong, but like everybody has the cancer bug. Like we do, like certain events will trigger it to become active and it doesn't play favorites. It doesn't matter where you came from. It doesn't matter your lifestyle. It doesn't matter. Like there could be a guy that can chain smoke every day in his life and never get cancer. And then there can be a healthy individual all of a sudden going through cancer treatments, and having a stage 4 cancer. So it just doesn't pick favorites. And that was an industry that really drew my attention. My grandpa, who is my role model, he's not with us anymore. He was my light. He actually was diagnosed with lung cancer, never smoked a day in his life, but he owned his cement plant. So, like, again, certain events can trigger it to be active. And so that's actually what started my quest into oncology is I was like, I want to understand this better. Like, I want to understand like how it forms in the body, like how they treat it, because like the medical field's always changing. And that really drew my attention. It was like, okay, I want to understand this a little bit better. So like when somebody in oncology, I can be that person to like tell them what's happening and be that solution and that not problem, but solution to help them go through it. And when I graduated in oncology, I moved to South Dakota and my first case was a 4-month-old baby. And I'm not ready. Fresh out of college, 25 years old, no kids of my own, not married. And I was in pediatric oncology and it was just like, ooh. It was like all of a sudden I'm treating this infant and this family because it's like you're trying to explain the process to this family and get them to understand what's happening to their child. And it was just like I couldn't emotionally relate, I guess you could say. So I kind of took a step back from that and actually sold insurance, believe it or not.
Wow.
I sold health insurance. So I sold supplemental insurance door to door, which is the hardest sell you will ever do in your life. Like you got 5 seconds to make an impression. Like 5 seconds, that's it. And so I loved it. I actually did that for 11 years, believe it or not.
Wow. Door to door, or did it move to something else?
Well, later in my insurance realm, I ended up going to business B2B. But I started out door to door and I loved it. I would roll up on farms. Here I'm a small town girl, so I'd roll up in buck boots, and there's a farmer and a tractor, and I'm like, hey, let me help you. Like, I'm
Yeah.
Amanda. I'm here just to show you some insurance that will protect you. And the reason I loved it so much is because I'm a fixer, so I was still helping them. You know, I was giving them
Yeah.
a solution if they went through like cancer, heart, or an accident. Where the insurance company I worked for at the time called Family Heritage, we would give money directly to the individual. So it gave them an opportunity to focus on their health instead of the expenses attached to it. Because like
Mm.
anything in the medical field, like when you go through like a big accident or, you know, cancer, that's like a 6 months to a year process. Like it's not something that
Right.
you can fix right away, or even heart attack. And so it allowed these individuals to go get the quality care they wanted instead of the quality care they could afford. And
Yeah.
so I really flourished in that. And that's actually how I met my husband, believe it or not, on a
All
blind
right.
date.
You
Um,
just rolled up at his farm and in your boots and offered him insurance?
no. Well, that would have been the perfect story.
Yeah, because that's like a Hallmark movie, like,
No, one of my clients was their agriculture family, and he set me up on kind of a blind date, as you can say. Um, I was taking over the territory, and I had to introduce myself to the existing clients in Family Heritage, and he was already a client. He had our cancer policy, and he's like, "There's this young, hot, single farmer. You need to meet him." And I'm like, I am not looking for a date or anything. And so I ended up introducing myself to him, and he tricked me. He tricked me. So he was like, I was at the time where I was moving from big town, Sioux Falls, South Dakota, to a smaller town because I had so many cancer claims that I wanted to be closer to my clients. And I was looking for a trailer, and I was like, okay, I need to find a trailer. And I reached out to this young single farmer, and I was like, hey, I'm Amanda. Like, I introduced myself. I was telling him that I'm taking over the territory. And I was like, yeah, I'm kind of looking for a trailer. And he's like, well, if I help you find a trailer, you have to go on a date with me. I
Oh,
was like,
wow.
okay, like, sure, I'll go on a date with you. And every farmer, let's be honest, like, has a trailer. What farmer does not have and so, yeah, he was just like, I have a trailer, and how does next Thursday sound? I was like, crap. Okay, I'm gonna go on this start. And it was funny too, because I rolled up on our date wearing like stiletto heels. Because you have to understand, I was destined for the big city. Like that's where I wanted to
Yeah.
end up. And so I remember rolling up in these red stiletto heels, and he's just like, I don't know who this girl is, but I gotta get to know her. And yeah, after our first date, we had a couple more dates, and I was like, yeah, this guy's going nowhere. I'm like,
Yeah.
I'm here.
Yeah. That does sound like a Hallmark movie. The big city girl rolls up to a date with a farm boy in red stiletto heels. So that led you back into the farming space that once was part of, like, everybody went into those areas, and suddenly you found yourself back into that. So what happened next? Is that when you stepped away from insurance and started?
No, I kept insurance. So I still did insurance. I went on a couple dates. Well, then we ended up dating. And shortly after I did move in with him, it was quick.
Yeah.
When you're later in life, you meet that person. It's just like, it makes sense. Like
Right.
when you meet that person, everything flows perfectly. And so, I remember one of his tests for me was he had me get in this quad track. I think it was like a 500 or 520 quad track, Case IH quad track. And he was like, I'm going to explain how to drive it. Because again, I didn't grow up in agriculture, but I'm
Yeah.
always up for a challenge. And so
Yeah.
he's on the radio explaining how to drive this quad track that had these big, massive rollers on the back of it. Because I was going to roll
Yeah.
soybeans. So what we do in agriculture, let me
Quite
explain
an
this.
audition. Wow.
Yeah, it was quite the addition. Like in agriculture, we roll soybeans because we push the rocks down. Because when you harvest soybeans, you get so close to the ground that the combine will get caught on rocks. And so you have to almost like lay it super flat to be able to harvest soybeans in the fall. And so he's like, there was a storm coming, and he's like, I need help. Like, I know you didn't grow up in ag, but I'm going to throw you into this tractor, and you're going to roll soybeans behind me as I'm planting. And I was like, okay, whatever. This can't be too hard. And so I get in this quad track and there's like these buttons all over the place. And he's like, I need you to flick this button, do this button. You know, there's the turtle and rabbit, you know, for speed. And he's like, don't go all the way to the rabbit, you know, go in between. And so I'm like doing all this stuff, getting out into the field. Well, luckily the field wasn't too far from the farm. And I get out there and he's like, okay, now you have to unroll the rollers and follow behind me. And I was like, okay, I got this. He's like, well, I just want to tell you that this is the only field that is actually fenced. So don't take out the fence. And I was like, you're putting me in a field where it's fenced and the rollers are huge. And I'm like, okay, I got this. Like, I'm going to do this. So I get out there, I get it all unrolled. And luckily I didn't take out the fence, you know, and I caught up to him and finished rolling this field. And we get back to the farm. And my husband will say, like, that's when he knew. He's like, I got to put a ring on this girl. Like, she's going, I'm gonna get married. And so, yeah, a year later he proposed and 2 kids later. And so insurance, I still sold insurance for the first part of our marriage. Like, there's so much to understand. Like, he typically, you know, most farm wives, they do the bookkeeping and that kind of thing. Well, I quickly realized, like, that's not my thing. Like, there's so many codes when you're doing accounting work for farming and you have to put them in the right category. And that just being stuck in an office was not my type of thing. So I did keep up on insurance, but I did kind of back off to like barely part-time because I wanted to be a hands-on mom with our children and be an active role on the farm. And so like I always tell everybody, like, you can put me in any piece of equipment. Like, I'm the perfect wheel turner. Like, I can drive anything, but as soon as things break down, I'm out. If I can't Google it or YouTube it, like, I'm out. So that was kind of like how it started. And then I kept up with insurance up until COVID, 2020. And then I'm sure we'll get into that story, but things kind of changed once COVID hit and kind of put a huge wrench, I guess, in the direction I ended up going.
Yeah, so there's no more turning up at people's houses because you didn't do that anymore. And so that changed for a lot of people of what you could do, especially people that their job relied on them meeting people and interacting with people and all of that stuff. So did you totally stop insurance at that point? Like when did the transition happen into pursuing things around mental health and fitness?
So leading up to COVID, we did build our forever home, which was actually located half a mile south of the farm. So he is the only farmer, I guess, in his family because his dad died of brain cancer really young. And then his sister lives down in Oklahoma. So for him, he kind of took over the role of farming for his family. And when COVID hit, the day before the national pandemic, we were living in our forever home. You know, everybody was getting ready for the lockdown because like the next day, March 20th, you know, we were locked down for 2 weeks.
Right.
I remember I was taking
that was the longest 2 weeks ever.
like the whole year, 2 years, 4 years.
Yeah.
But I was in the process of moving, taking my youngest to daycare because I still worked insurance part-time. You know, and as we're trying to figure out that transition into like being, you know, you can't talk to anyone, like face-to-face contact wasn't recommended. And so I remember that morning I was getting my youngest ready for daycare. I was really frazzled because I had a couple business meetings that were Zoom that I was going to give them a pitch for insurance, you know, to offer to their employees. And I get to the daycare, drop my youngest off at daycare, and I look at my phone and I had 8 calls for my husband. You know, and when you get 8 calls from somebody,
right,
like, ooh, like that gut feeling of something's wrong because you don't call people that many times. And so I remember getting on the phone with my husband and he was like, hey, the house is on fire. You need to get home. And at this
time, is this
time,
your forever home?
Our forever home. Yeah. We just built it 4 years prior. We just built our dream home 4 years prior. You know, it had everything we wanted. All the, like, you know, we poured our heart and soul into building this forever home. And I remember thinking in the back of my head, like, is he serious? Like, is this really happening? And he repeated himself. And I was like, oh my gosh, like it's like our house is really on fire. And so again, my fix it personality, I'm like, I know where the fire extinguishers are in the house. Like I can put this out. And so I remember jetting home, and at the time the daycare was 10 miles away from our house, so not far.
Yeah.
And I got home, and as I'm pulling down the driveway, I see the smoke, and I was like, okay, I'm going to run in this house and put out this fire. And so I pulled up to the house, and I remember running up to the front door, and I hit this. We had massive like cedar pillars in the front of our house. And if you're running full force hitting one of those, like I flew back on my back. Like it just knocked
Wow.
me completely out. And I was like, nope, I'm going to go around back now. So I remember running around back. And by the time I got to the back of the house, the garage was gone. Like we had a
Wow.
three stall garage. And at that time, I just kind of stopped in my tracks, and I'm like, if I go in that house, I'm not going to come back out. And then
Yeah.
I finally, at the time, my husband and my oldest were home, and they actually climbed out the master bedroom window. And so they were in the horse barn that was across the farm, our little farmstead yard. And I could hear them crying. And so I came back to the front, and I remember we waited 38 minutes for the fire department, which in rural America,
Wow.
that's
Wow.
not a lot of time. Like that's super quick. You have to understand, like these are all volunteer firefighters. Like it was 8 a.m, so they more than likely were already at work, and they had to leave work, get to the fire department, load the fire trucks, change, get to our house, which was,
Yeah.
15 miles outside of the small town that we live close by. And so like 38 minutes, that's an amazing time. But for me, like in that 38 minutes, it's just like you're watching your
It's the
forever
longest
home.
time ever. Yeah.
Oh my God, it was so long. And like,
Yeah.
I mean, they started working on the house, trying to like stop the fire. And then next thing you know, another fire department showed up from another small town, and another one. We ended up having 5 local fire departments from small neighboring towns come to try to put out
Wow.
this house fire. And finally I heard this excavator come down the driveway, and it just kind of like sunk in. It's like, my house is completely gone. Like there's going to
Wow.
be nothing left. Like they ended up collapsing it on itself because it's March, and so
Yeah.
it's cold. There was still snow on the ground, and they were more worried, like, hey, we don't want this to spread into the neighboring field, which was our field. And they're
Yeah.
like, we're going to have to collapse your home on itself to get it to
Wow.
stop. And so,
Wow.
yeah,
Was it a log home as well?
yeah. So we had, some of it was mostly, we had cedar post in the front. It was a wraparound deck. I mean, it was a big home. Like it was,
Yeah.
I think like 3,800 square feet on one level. And then the basement matched it. And then we had a loft, and it was 18 feet or 18, pitch ceiling. So it was like
Yeah.
angled inside with like exposed beams and stuff. So it was kind of like a log home, but it wasn't. But
Yeah.
what
Yeah.
really got us is we did the spray foam thing. And so I guess when you spray foam your home, it kind of acts like an insulator, and
Right.
keeps all the heat in. And so it was one of the hottest fires they ever had to deal with, because like it
My
just
goodness.
spread it all in the house. And so they collapsed the home on itself, and that next day it was like the national lockdown. So you couldn't,
Oh
like, we
my
couldn't go
goodness.
shopping, we couldn't get groceries, everything was shut down. And so it was just
Wow.
like, what the heck are we gonna do? Like, how do we navigate this? And luckily we had amazing neighbors that showed up, and would drop stuff at the door and then call us and be like, hey, I just dropped off a bunch of stuff for you guys.
Yeah.
Small town America, just great neighbors. But I would have to say, like, I've never been mentally so low in my life. Like
Wow.
it was that moment where it was just like, I didn't know what to do next. I'm homeschooling my children, which I can teach an adult any day, but you tell me to teach it at the time it was a 5-year-old and a almost 8-year-old. I mean, the math they're doing the days, I don't know what I was doing. Like, it was just like,
The Common Core and all that stuff.
yeah, I'm like, why can't we go back to the old way? It was working. Like, what is this? So, I ended up, I couldn't do my career. I couldn't sell insurance. I couldn't, I was homeschooling our children, and we're trying to social distance. At the time, we're living in the shop because we had nowhere to go. So we're
Wow.
back half a mile to the north at the main farm. And so we're trying to figure out this transition. And like, I mean, I just really struggled
Yeah.
with my own identity, like what was next. And I remember, like, for me, I've always been very active. Like, I've been your competitive. Like, if you play any sports, I'm that person that you hate to play against because I'm so competitive. And so, like, I've always
Yeah.
been the
From
fitness.
Uno to sports, right? Like,
Yeah, I mean,
don't
no,
mess
I mean,
with
card
you.
games, I'm even competitive. I don't let my kids play. And so, like, it was just one of those things where, like, for me, I just really emotionally was at my lowest point. Like, I didn't know what to do. For my husband, it wasn't, nothing really changed for him. Like, he was still able to, go back to farming because, farming's a very solo job. You're in the tractor by yourself. So, like,
Right.
for him going into planting season, I mean, it didn't really change too much for him. But like for me, it just rocked my world. It was like
Right.
I was trying to figure out all these next steps. And so I do have an associate's degree in health promotion. And I've been that mom, that gained 60 pounds in one pregnancy, had 2 C-sections. So like I've always been super physically active because I was diving into my own fitness journey from 2017. And my husband knew that. Well, my gym was in our house. And so he would go to our junk pile and bring me these like random pieces of equipment. Like we're talking old tractor tires, like weights from like tractors. And he's like, here, use this. Cause you couldn't get gym equipment. Like
Yeah.
everything was
Yeah.
buying up. Like, cause everybody's stuck at home. So everybody's
Right.
buying gym equipment. And so he was bringing me these random pieces of equipment to use. And so I started posting it online, believe it or not, on social media. I was like, you know what? I'm going to do a tire flipping workout and I'm going to post this
Yeah.
online. And I had people ask me, they're like, what are you doing? Whose program are you doing? I'm like, well, I'm kind of creating it, like
Yeah.
mine. And
Yeah.
so I started posting these random workouts. Well, then in May of 2020, I was like, you know what? I'm not certified at this time. I got online, found this planking challenge because we know planking works the whole
Right.
entire body. Like it not only aligns your body, it helps your circulatory system, boost your mood in 30 seconds. 30 seconds. So I did
So
this.
explain to those that might be listening that don't know what planking is.
So when you get down on your elbows and you're extended out and you're engaging not only your core, your legs, your back, your upper body, you're holding your body weight in a position where you're holding it for 30 seconds, 45 seconds. And the reason why it's a full body movement is because you're engaging so many muscle groups at the same time. And so planking is one of the movements. It's one of those old movements that a lot of people forget to do that works your whole entire body. And I talked about a few of the benefits. It helps your circulatory system because you're holding this movement and you're engaging all your muscles all at once. And so
Right.
it helps the flow of your blood in your body. It helps aligns your back because you're holding this position, engaging your core. So
Yeah. So it's basically like you're trying to keep a straight line. You're kind of like doing
yeah,
it like a push-up position that most people are familiar with, but except you're on your elbows and your body is as straight as possible, and then you're on your toes, right? And so you just try and hold that straight line while you're on your elbows and on your toes facing the ground position, right?
yep. And you don't want
Okay.
to move. So that's why
Right.
it's one of those movements where you're locked into that position and you're holding it. So you're
Yeah.
holding all your muscles tight at the same time. And that's why it really works your whole entire body because you're engaging so many muscle groups in just that one movement. And
How
it's
long do you hold it for?
well, the plank challenge actually built up. So it started at like 20 seconds and then at day 30 it went up to 5 minutes.
Whoa.
Yeah.
Wow.
So,
Okay.
and like I said, I put this planking challenge together and I actually challenged a bunch of farmers to join me. I was like,
Yeah.
I'm going to just throw this out there and see if anybody wants to join me. I don't even know. I had 800, Paul. I had 800 plus. I don't
Wow.
even know
Wow.
the count of farmers across the world. I mean, we had people in Australia join, UK. It just went viral. Everybody was planking on like tractors, bison,
That's
I mean,
awesome. Wow.
barns. Like it was, but it opened my eyes. Like it's like,
Yeah.
okay, everybody is bridging that gap between consumer and producer because agriculture is the industry that a lot of people don't understand. Let's be honest. Like they
Yeah.
Like, especially when people go to the grocery store, they instantly blame the farmers for the increase of food prices when it's not us. Like, we're still getting paid the same. It's your middlemen that are making all the money. And it's
Yeah.
like, and GMO, for example, a lot of people don't understand that. And so, again, it was just one of those things where it was giving the people a space to work on themselves. And it really opened my eyes into that, where it's like, okay, everybody on social media is doing a great job bridging that gap between consumer and producer, agriculture, and then what you buy in the grocery store. But nobody's really tackling the physical and mental health and bridging that gap. Because like agriculture as a whole is an industry that's vastly improving daily. Like, I mean, they have, believe it or not, Paul, they have self-run tractors that drive themselves, like on a little remote control, like a video game. Like maybe we don't have that. I wish we did. That would be cool. Drive a tractor out in the field. But a lot of the manual labor side of things in agriculture is getting replaced by technology, which is a great thing. It shows that our industry is vastly improving. It's like not only just vastly improving, but we're advancing when it comes to technology practices, and keeping up with the times and keeping ahead of it, with soil health and all of that. Where like back in the day, you used to have to pick up hay bales. Sorry, my dog's barking. But we used to have to pick up hay bales and throw them on the back of a tractor. Well, now they have a machine that will pick them up and do it. Like, you don't have to physically do it. So the physical and mental side of things of agriculture was going downhill. And that's really where it opened my eyes. It was like, okay, nobody's approaching this. Like, nobody's talking about, working on yourself, physically, and how it impacts your mental health as well. Like, if you...
I find it fascinating that, and I think that for somebody listening to this, it is a little bit of a head smack moment for them, is when you think of niching and, you found this niche of health and fitness for farmers. And most people will think, oh my goodness, that's just so niche. Like, who's going to want to do that? Like, how are you going to find enough people to make a living or make any impact? You said 800 people from around the world signed up for your first offer. And so, be mindful of, when you're niching is, it might be a lot bigger than you think. If you lean into something that you're super passionate about. So I want to encourage somebody in that is if you're looking at niching, you might be staying away from a niche that is actually has enough people in it that you can serve well and serve passionately. So give it a shot and kind of put it out there and see if it's a valid offer. And so that's amazing that you found that. And so you did this plank challenge, and what happened after that? Well, what kind of led you to the next steps with the interest that you had from that?
Well, I loved it so much because, like, again, it was kind of my realm, again, fix it personality, and agriculture is the industry I live in. I understand it because, like, at the time I was buried into it, and like I really understand it. And so I started doing a couple more. I did 2 more free challenges. So these were free challenges online that I did because at the time I wasn't certified, so I couldn't charge someone. And I decided I turned to my husband, and I remember telling him about my ideal of like, hey, I want to become a certified coach, and I want to tailor programs to people in the agriculture community. And like, agriculture is bigger than you think. Like, when we're talking agriculture, we're not just talking farm wives and farmers. We're talking people that work at John Deere, Case IH, Caterpillar. We're talking about the ones that work for industries that are within agriculture. And that's really big. Like, it's a big industry. We're truly the backbone of the world in any country, because if you don't have a food system, if you don't have farmers, there's not going to be food in the grocery stores. There's not going to be, there's not going to be those, what is it? Amenities is maybe I want to put there that we take for granted. Nowadays we can go to a grocery store and get avocados, and avocados like are grown in California or Mexico, so it's just like, it was really cool and opening my eyes in that aspect. And so then I knew I wanted to be online because, small town America, like, I was like, I can't get enough clientele to make this a flourishing business. And so I started doing this entrepreneurship of learning how to run a business online. And during that time, I went back and got certified as a personal trainer and nutrition coach. And I was like, okay, I'm going to start there and see where this takes me. And so then I remember the first day I opened the doors, February 5th of 2021. So this is less than 10 months after our house burned down. Less than 10 months.
Wow.
I opened the doors to FarmFit Training. And I remember that feeling of like, is anybody going to trust me? Like, is anybody going to even apply? I had 60 applications in 45 minutes. And I only 25 clients. So only 25 clients at a time, because like they were one-on-one. But I remember my mentor at the time, she was like, don't be shocked if you get 1 or 2 clients in your first 6 months. Like, you have to build up. Like,
yeah.
The fact that I had a full roster within 3 days was insane.
That's amazing.
And I loved it. And it wasn't just women too. Like, I did have a lot of women that applied at first. You know, I get it. A lot of men are not going to hire a female coach. But now I would say I'm split down the middle. Like, I'm 50-50. I have men clientele and women clientele across the world. I'm actually international, which is really cool.
Wow.
So, open the doors, and then the rest is history. Like, it just, I love it.
What was that?
I said, I thank God every day for opportunity.
Yeah. Well, and what I love about your story too is the fact that you started using the things around you, you know, when it came to the fitness. I mean, it was basically CrossFit, right? You know, with, you know, flipping tires, you know, lifting random things, challenging muscles in new ways because it wasn't perfect gym equipment and all of that. And so I think that's amazing that, you know, instead of saying until I have X amount of tools or X amount of resources, unless I have this, I really can't do that, is you kind of made do with what you had at the time and made it work. And I think for a lot of entrepreneurs and business owners, you know, we can sometimes get stuck in this place of, until I have this tool, until I have that tool, until I have that equipment, until I have that person, until I have that thing, I can't do anything at all. And so you took what you had around you and made it work, and it became a part of your thing, because that it also encouraged other farmers that might not have access to, you know, gym equipment, that might not have access to all the tools that other trainers might offer, but you know, have a way of helping them with the things that they have around, right? Is that still part of what you're doing, or has it migrated to something else now?
100%. It's still our motto. So like, when I was getting certified, I read this case study, and I'll never forget it. In this case study, they took 100 people, you know, 50-50. They split them right down the middle. And they gave this first group of 50 people, they gave them 4 movements, simple movements. Like, we're talking deadlift, you know, squats, like nothing, not a fancy movement. Because I know there's so many fancy, like, wall Pilates is out there. And I'm like, what the heck is wall Pilates? Like, what are we doing here? Like, basic movements. And they're like, okay, this first group, they're going to have them work out 15 to 25 minutes. They're going to go 4 rounds doing these 4 simple movements. And then they took this next group in the study, they took this next group of individuals, and they're like, okay, you have to do the same 4 movements, but now we're going to go for time, 45 minutes to an hour. And they, over the course of the 3-month period, the group that had the best progress is the one that actually had the shorter amount of time, believe it or not.
Wow.
Because they did progressive overload. And what that means is they challenged their muscles with heavier weights. So once they got comfortable doing 10 reps, you know, for example, let's just say like bicep curls, they were doing 15-pound weights with bicep curls, they would increase their weight and challenge their muscles, you know, to grow. So what happens when you lift weight or do resistant training is you create these like, and I always use this analogy. So your muscles are like this. And when you lift weights, you create this micro tear in your muscles. And that's actually what helps build and repair your muscles, especially when you couple it with a high protein diet. And so they notice that they put on more muscle mass. Well, muscle shreds fat faster. You know, our muscle skeleton is actually our biggest organ in our entire body. And so they were able to build muscle, shred fat faster, gain energy compared to this group that worked out 45 minutes to an hour. And so I took that methodology and I applied it to FarmFit Training, where you don't need a lot of equipment. Like, you can use anything around your farm. And just like you said, a farmyard is like a CrossFit haven. It just takes away
Right, right.
creativity. And so like that's one of the things I still talk about is like, hey, if you're up in like I had a gal, for example, one of my first clients, she was part of my OGs. She's still with me to this day. Crazy. Believe it or
Wow.
not.
Wow.
Like out of the original 25, 18 of them are still with me to this day.
Oh,
It's
that's amazing.
super cool. So she lived up in the middle of Quadoc, I don't even know, Canada. Like, Canada's massive. And
Right.
her closest town to her was an hour and a half. And so when she applied for my program, she didn't have any weights. She was just like, I need to do something. So she actually grabbed buckets of oats and used them
Wow.
as weights for this. Like
Wow.
at the time, my one-on-one coaching was 12 weeks. And how we adjusted the weight is we would add water to them. And then she'd put them on the cattle scale, get the measurements so we knew how much it weighed. I'm not
Yeah.
making this up. Her
This
name's
is awesome. So
Yeah,
it's
and
not
then
lifting chickens and then you're lifting,
no,
sheep, and eventually you're lifting a cow, right? This is
oh
like,
no. But yeah, she would like feed them to the chickens. She would feed the oats to the chickens,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
After it kind of got spoiled. But yeah, her transformation was huge because again,
That's
she
amazing.
coupled nutrition with resistance training. And so like anybody that's out there looking for a fitness program, make sure it has both of those components. Like you're doing a resistant training program with nutrition and understanding nutrition and how to feel your body. It was just
So with the weights, you were saying that it's a matter of doing heavier things less times is better than doing lighter things a lot of times. Is that what you were saying?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah.
So you have to challenge your muscles. So like if you're like if for example, Paul, if I approached you with a 25-minute workout, wouldn't you instantly pick up a heavier weight? You're like, I'm going to give this hell for 25 minutes,
Yeah.
and then you go through your first set and be like, I could go heavier. Or like, let's say you started super heavy and you're like, okay, maybe I need to drop down because I'm not going to make those next 3 rounds. Again, you're still challenging your muscles.
Right.
Like if somebody approached you with a 45-minute workout, you're like, I'm going to go light because there's no way I'm going to make that 45-minute mark,
Yeah.
And so a lot of times, a lot of individuals don't understand that. Like, hey, in order to build muscle, you have to challenge them. You have to create those micro tears. And the only way to do that is to lift heavy. And a lot of women are like, well, I don't want to lift heavy because I don't want to look like a man. Well, that's one of the biggest myths. Our chemical makeup is totally different from a man. Like, there's no way I'm going to look. Don't get me wrong. There's some women on social media where you see them and you're like, ooh, I don't want to fight her. Like,
right. But they've really, really worked hard to get to that place.
Yeah.
They didn't get there by mistake.
Yeah. There's something else going on there. But, But again, like when you pick up heavier weights, for women, we get leaner, smaller, tighter, and you start to see that tone look that we're all after. And for men, again, your chemical makeup's a lot different. When you're pushing heavier weights, you're building that muscle. So you're starting to shred fat, see that muscle definition, those arms. A lot of men want those chiseled arm and then, man chest, so there's a lot of beautiful things that come from that. And so I took those two methodologies, minimum equipment again, and I'm showing individuals, hey, like you don't need to have this huge, massive setup gym. It just takes a little creativity and thinking outside the box, and you can achieve any result you want as long as you're disciplined and you're consistent.
Yeah. Well, kind of like you shared about the planking, what are some other things that somebody could start today that could start towards that health and feeling better? You said, the planking was like a full body, activity. What are some other things that you have started people off with, especially somebody that might not have been doing that is new to this? What are some recommendations that you have?
I would always tell everybody to pay attention to water. For example, water is another thing. Like a lot of people don't realize, like even a slight 2% dehydration will affect your memory, your thinking, your cognitive skills, like everything. So like I always have every single client that comes into FarmFit Training, I have them drink a gallon of water, which seems like a lot of water. I get it, but I'm 5'1", $125, and I get a gallon in. So you can do it. So I always tell them, hey, do gallon of water, replace it with your soda, because soda is so packed of like preservatives and sugar, if you're someone that's addicted to it, aim for your gallon of water first, and then maybe have a pop or, Coke or whatever your guilty pleasure is, in that aspect. And then also protein. Like
Yeah.
focus it, like eat protein first, because like in today's society, if you look at it, everything's focused around food. Like if you go to an event, there's always food. Like you can go to a farming event, for example, in my case, and there's always vendors all over the place, selling food.
Right.
Or a family gathering, guess what? Food's there. It's just our society. Like food is fast food chain restaurants are all over the place. And so when you go to eat your meal, or let's say you're going to eat lunch or dinner, focus on eating your protein first before you eat your carbohydrates. And carbs are like your breads, your pastas, your vegetables, any of that stuff. Just by making sure you're getting enough protein in a day will really change your body as well. And I can use an example. So my stepdad's a pilot. I actually have been working with his nutrition finally. 4 years of launching my program, he finally came to me. But he flies all over Colorado. So he's based out of Denver, Colorado. And he works for a company called Great Aviation, and they fly all over the place. And so I was talking to him about some high protein snacks to grab to help him, like tuna packs and, hard boiled eggs, great to get because he's at like different hotels in the morning. Because when they get to a destination, they have to stay at a hotel. We were going through all of that. And when I was talking to him about it, I'm like, you're supposed to be eating 1 gram per body weight of protein a day. And he's a big dude. Like my stepdad's like 200 pounds, and we kind of calculated what he was eating in protein. And he was like, I'm not even close to what I'm supposed to be eating in protein. And so once we honed that in and got him like at least 170 grams of protein a day, he's like, the first week completely sucked. He was like, I was grumpy. I was not having it. But he's like, he called me one day after church and he was like, my energy's up. I feel like my normal self again. He's like, I've noticed like my skin's starting to get clearer. Like I just feel complete. And so a lot of clients that come into FarmFit Training don't realize how much they undereat when it comes to protein. And that's one of those eye-opening things is like when you start to calculate it and start to track it, you're like, oh, I eat protein all day. And it's like, okay, like let's track it and see where you're actually at. And then when they find out, like, wait a minute, I'm not even close to half of what I'm supposed to be eating in protein. So I always tell them, make sure that, something simple you could do is like a plank that we talked about, a gallon of water a day, and then always eat protein first and make sure you have protein with every meal. So if you're going to go grab a snack, like let's say you're going to have chips, like I'm all about, instead of subtract, add is the method I go about, because like as soon as you tell someone they can't have a certain type of food, what do they crave?
That's all they think about, right?
That's all they think about. Like you told me I couldn't have chocolate, I'm going to crave chocolate. So instead of like taking it out of your diet, just couple it with protein. And then next thing you know, you're going to start to make healthier choices because you're going to start to look at nutrition differently. Because at the end of the day, we're all emotionally attached to food, even if we like to admit it or not. And so just to get that attachment away and start to view food as fuel, it just changes your thinking and your mindset around it.
Yeah. Well, so it sounds like most people are actually undernourished or under eating, and they don't even realize it. Like you mentioned, your stepfather thought that he was eating fine, but he was not eating enough protein. Do you think that, and with your agriculture background, is that we are not getting the amount of nutrition that we think we are, even though we think we're eating a lot or we're eating well, because we're not eating the right things?
Yeah.
Is that correct? Yeah.
I would say so, because like a lot of times, like when you go to fast food restaurants, what's the first thing we gravitate towards? French fries, or something like that. And we're not thinking about the type of foods that we could be eating. Especially when it comes to like protein. Like I'll be the first to admit, I always thought I was eating enough protein. And then once I started diving into it, it's like, wait a minute, I'm not actually fueling my body correctly. And a lot of people don't understand the science behind nutrition either. And that's one of the things that we really educate on is like when you join FarmFit Training, I'm going to actually explain what protein is, what it does to your body, like what are good sources of protein. Same with carbohydrates. Like there's simple and complex carbohydrates. Like let me break them down and explain the difference between the two. Or when you get into fats, you know, a lot of people avoid fats because they're like, oh, I'm going to gain fat because I'm eating fat. And it's like,
because fat-free was such a big thing. Everybody kept talking about fat-free everything.
yeah. And it's like, well, when you actually understand fats, like there's 3 different types of fats. There's trans fats, saturated fats, and unsaturated fats. Let's explain the science and what they are so you will actually understand. And when people are armed with that knowledge, they actually start to make better choices for themselves naturally. And again, it's all about that education. And so like when someone comes into the program, I know they're not going to be with me for life. You know, granted, I do have 18 that have been with me since the get-go, but I want them to understand how to feel their body correctly and to really understand what they're putting in their body and what it does to the body. And so we really like to educate the science behind it. And really give them that knowledge to the point where they could be like a personal trainer because they understand it and they understand how to feel their body. And so we actually do something called macronutrients. Have you heard of that before?
I've heard the term, but I'm not familiar with it.
Okay,
so go ahead and explain it.
The word macro means large. So you're focusing on the nutritional value of foods in large amounts. So it's actually a nutrition theory. It's not a diet. Because a lot of times when we hear that word diet, we think of restrictive, right? When you hear somebody on a diet, you're like, oh, they're cutting out food. Like they can't have this. And that's just the notation, even though the word diet means nutrition profile, right? It's talking about all the food that you're putting in your body. And so I always tell everybody when they start the program, like macronutrients, it's not a diet. We're talking about a nutritional theory. So we're focusing on protein, carbs, and fats in large amounts to fuel our body and to really be able to function at its ultimate best. And that doesn't mean taking foods away. Like that means, you know, again, looking at it as a different perspective. Like you can still have Oreos, like you can still have ice cream. I had ice cream last night, you know, and it still fit into my nutrition. So you can still enjoy food, but you're looking at that nutritional values of like, hey, what am I going to gain from eating this food? You know, and so you start to detach yourself emotionally from food and start looking at it as like, hey, how am I going to fuel my body today? Like I can make pork chops, I can make, you know, a steak, I can make, you know, and so you start to think of that way. And so a lot of times like fitness programs, especially nutritional coaches out there, will give you this cookie cutter program, right? Let's be honest. They'll give you like this meal guide and be like, you're eating chicken and rice for the next 6 weeks. Well, what if you don't like chicken and rice? You know? Like, it's towards your diet. And then 2 is, what is that teaching you? At the end of the day, you're like, okay, I ate what they told me to eat and I lost all this weight and built all this muscle, but I still don't know anything about nutrition. And so how we approach nutrition is I give you meals. So I give you high protein meals. Like I have a recipe library of over 500 plus recipes, 1,000, I'm probably up to 1,000 now, that you have access to, that you can cook a meal for your whole family that is high protein, that everybody's going to love, kid friendly, because I have 2 very picky little boys, you know, that are going to fuel you. And then you're going to hit your numbers, but you're not making a separate meal for yourself. And so it's a more of a sustainable approach, because instead of like saying I have to eat this certain way and the rest of the family is eating something else, no, I'm taking the whole family on a healthy course and we're all eating healthy, high protein, you know, high fiber meals and filling ourselves. And I'm hitting my weight loss goals and it's filling my whole family. And so it becomes fun, because then you start to eat differently and you're like, oh, I just have to make this one meal and it's going to work for everyone.
Yeah. Now, you know, with your background in oncology as well, where you kind of started off things, have you tied that into nutrition and the things that we're putting into a body as well? Or have you separated that because you're more on the other side of fitness, where it's to do with working out and behavior and all that as well? Or are you tying those two together?
Believe it or not, a lot of the stuff that I learned in oncology, especially the nutrition side of things, does carry into what I'm doing today. Because like when you have cancer, for example, they encourage you not to have sugar, because sugar kind of fuels cancer. And so believe it or not, little nuggets of it do carry over, not a lot. I've worked with nutritionists when people went through cancer, especially when I was doing my clinical rotations, and I did peek at it. And it's a very bland diet, I'll be honest. They kind of take everything out of it. But still, some of that knowledge from like how to fill our bodies, like at the end of the day, like if you think about it, we all started as cavemen, cavewomen. We all were the meat type carnivores. Like I mean, don't get me wrong. Like I see a ton of people doing the carnivore diet and stuff like that. I I mean, I'm not against it, but at the end of the day, you do need carbs. Carbs are like your gas tank. Like if you think of it this way, like when you put diesel in like a gas car, it's going to run sluggish. It's not going to run right. But when you put gasoline, the right type of gasoline in a car, it's going to run smooth, great, ultimate. So you do need carbs, but it balances out. Like everybody's unique. Our bodies are unique. How the type of like the balance between protein, carbs, and fats, they're all different for every single person. And so when you start to fuel yourself correctly, it's just like this whole physical shift, but also mental shift. Like you start to mentally start to notice that you're unstoppable. You start to push your own boundaries. And that's the cool side of mental health, is because that's why I went and got certified. So I did get certified, and it's called through NASM, National Academy of Sports Medicine. I got certified as a wellness coach. And a wellness coach is like stress management, nutrition, environmental, mental changes. And so that certification goes more into like the science behind what, fueling ourselves and that physical exertion, and how you really create this longevity for yourself. And one of the posts I did recently, I don't know if you saw it, Paul, is I said, I talked about like, hey, if you go to a doctor and they instantly prescribe you pills before asking about your nutrition and exercise, then you have a pill pusher, a dealer basically, and not a doctor. And I got a lot of feedback from that post, because a lot of people are like, you're right. Like, everybody should start with their nutrition and exercise. Like you can cure so many things. Like I've had so many clients go through FarmFit Training that were dependent on antidepressant pills.
Wow.
And the next thing you know it, halfway through the program, they're off it. Because again, they're feeling their body, they're changing their chemical profile, they're creating muscles, they're doing something for them, and they're taking charge of their life. And it kind of goes back to that I was saying, like, do you want to be the 80-year-old in a wheelchair when you go to the nursing home? Or do you want to be that 80-year-old that's dependent? Like there's that really cool reel floating around about this guy like lifting weights because he wanted to lift his daughter.
I've seen that. Yeah.
It's just the coolest thing, like that commercial, hands down, best. Whoever made that commercial, is best commercial, because it puts it in perspective.
Right.
Thinking like, wait a minute, like I want to be him. Like I want to be active in life. I want to be that person that ages, like fine wine, and be able to do whatever I want and have that flexibility when I'm older. Instead of being bounded to a wheelchair or a nursing home, I want that longevity aspect.
Right. So for folks that are listening to this, what's the biggest head smack that you want to give them that is a misunderstanding of whether it's mental health and wellness, physical, or nutritional? What's the big head smack you want to leave them with?
Start today. Honestly, like it doesn't have to be perfect. Just like when I started, I launched FarmFit Training. Like I didn't have all the tools. Like I didn't have these fancy pieces of equipment. I didn't have, I went and figured it out. I think the biggest head smack I want to leave them today is it doesn't have to be perfect. Just take that first step and, doing those 3 simple things that we talked about, water, protein every meal, give your longest investment. Like, we invest so much time into our business, our family, for in our case, we invest a lot into our land that we farm. Don't forget, like, hey, if you're not around later in life to see all those investments that you're putting in, like now's the time to start investing yourself and taking that 15 to 25 minutes to just start. It doesn't have to be pretty. Maybe your squats are going to look horrible and you can't even get close to the ground. Again, just start.
Yeah. What are three? You mentioned the plank. What are two other exercises that somebody can start today on their
Squats.
fitness journey?
You can do squats. Squats are something
Hmm.
super simple. And like you can do it anytime. You know, if you're just sitting there at your desk, like let's say I'm at my desk a lot because my business, is online. So I'm doing a lot of stuff like that. Sometimes I'll push my chair away and just do 10 squats,
Yeah.
something simple like that. Um, Another movement, walking. I know some fitness coaches don't like say walking is not exercise, but if you're 300 pounds, again, body weight, any body weight movement is considered, calisthenic movement is
Yeah.
a workout. So instead of, taking the elevator, if you're in an office, take the stairs, be that 1%.
Yeah. Well, and if you're
Being
drinking a gallon of water, you're going to do a lot of walking too, right?
to
So,
the back, see, that's yeah, yeah, the next
yeah,
time deal with that. So yeah, just be intentional is the biggest
yeah,
thing.
yeah,
And it doesn't, like, again, if you don't have weight equipment, if you don't have anything like that, your body is a great piece of weight. Like, push-ups. We talked about push-ups. A
right,
lot of people can't do push-ups, believe it or not. A
yeah,
lot of women, but also men. There's a lot of men out there that don't have correct form when it comes to push-ups. And so I love
yeah,
being able to teach them how to do a proper push-up because it's
yeah,
cool. Because once they learn it, they're like, wow, I was doing push-ups like totally wrong. Like,
yeah. So, what is the right way to do a push-up?
well, I do a tricep push-up because for women we don't have a stronger chest muscles compared to men. And so for me it's easier to do more of a tricep type push-up where you tuck your elbows in and you have your arms even with your chest and then you just push up against and that for us women, again, our upper body strength, like majority of our strength is actually in our legs. So like if you ever leg wrestle a woman, get ready. Like we're powerhouses when it comes to our legs, you know.
Yeah,
But for men, a lot of your upper body strength is in your arms. So you can go a little wider stance, like a 45-degree angle, and do a push up. And it'll work more of your back, your chest muscles, it'll work not only your arms. So for women, I would recommend like a tricep push up.
yeah,
Especially when they get going, because again, they're going to notice, and don't be afraid to start at your knees,
yeah,
as long as you engage your core, you squeeze not only your glutes, your legs, and when we're talking about engaging your core, think of someone like almost punching you in the stomach, how you get really tight,
yeah,
when anticipation, like you're like, oh, you squeeze all your
yeah.
muscles. That's what it's supposed to feel like when you engage your core. It's like someone's about ready to knock you in your stomach and you're like, squeeze all those muscles. So
Right.
if you maintain that, a push-up would be a great calisthenic workout that anybody can do anywhere.
So you mentioned doing a push-up instead of being on your toes and straight. You mentioned being on your knees and doing it like that for somebody just starting out
Yep.
is an
So like
option.
you basically put your knees together. So you put your knees so a push-up, you're in plank form. We talked about plank form in this video.
Right.
So before you do that, you just drop your knees. Again, you're still engaging your back. Your back is lined. You're still in a straight line, but your knees are on the ground. And then some women will cross their feet. I don't recommend it. Just to hold your feet tight together because then you'll be engaging your leg muscles properly.
Yeah.
And you want to be at least a 45 angle. And so then when you go down, make sure you get your chest all the way to the ground, all the way to
Yeah.
the ground. A lot of people don't get their chest completely to the ground and they count that as a push up. I'm like, no, you got to get all the way to the ground and then just push back up.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, Amanda, this has been amazing, and congrats on launching this in a short time and then having such international success with it. That's really amazing. And so, if people want to learn more about this, what's the best way to get a hold of you?
I'm actually FarmFit Momma, so it's FarmFit and then it's MOMMA on social. I changed my handle to that, believe it or not, in 2020. That
All
was
right.
for a while. So they can find me on every social media platform. And then we do have a website, which we do have, if they're interested in macros, we have a macro calculator on my website that they can check out. And then we also have a survey they can go through. And that's just farmfitmama.com as well.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Amanda. This has been wonderful. And hopefully somebody's been encouraged, not only in starting their business lean if they need to, with just lifting not chickens and goats, but lifting things around around you. Just use the tools that you have around you for whatever you're launching. Don't feel that you have to have everything in place before you can launch something. Sometimes you can just do stuff bare bones, and that's amazing. And also when it comes to your niche, you'd be surprised. For Amanda, it was simply farmers and fitness. And for some people, they would have been like, well, it might not be enough, but surprisingly, there was enough in that space. And so I want to encourage you guys with that. And then also with your fitness and with your health, definitely reach out to Amanda at farmfitmomma.com and see how you guys might be able to connect and how she might be able to help you with your fitness journey as well. Thank you, Amanda. This has been fun.
Yeah, thank you. Sorry for the dog barking. I mean, it's never ending here.
Yeah, that's totally fine. Well, you have a great day. Take care.
All right, thank you.